A confirmation about the audio first of all, guys. If the audio is clear and available, kindly confirm. Thank you. Anand, what are the environmental and economic aspects associated with the drainage system? So, whenever we talk about a drainage system, the economic aspect is predominant in the sense that it gives you the availability of water for cultivation, for irrigation purposes. So, drainage, wherever drainage systems have been in existence, there has been an agricultural prosperity associated. Historically, drainage systems have also been referred to as the cradle of civilization. Civilizations have risen forward. Availability of water is very much required for many of the industrial processes as well. For example, you will never find the industries such as, let's say, in many of the cases, textile, even in the cases of leather. These are basically the industries always associated with a particular river nearby. Then, when we talk about environmental aspect, so the flowing rivers, they end up indicating what is referred to as a lotic ecosystem, and that has the flow of the river has got a unique feature associated, which ensures a kind of a movement, and that ensures not only the recharge of the underground water level, but also the thriving floral and faunal species around the river. For example, you have many of the species such as gharials, a particular species of alligator, and also, for example, the Gangetic dolphin, Indus dolphin. They are to be found only in the case of moving rivers. So these are few of the aspects. Pranay, I started the process of knowing the boundaries of my state. Yes, that is something you should do. Very good. And slowly and steadily, you should expand your scope to the neighboring states and their boundaries as well. If you carry it out, then automatically, within no point of time, you will be very well aware of the political setup and the political boundaries across the country. So now we come to the portion of river systems of India and the forests. So here, the type of questions when we talk about the river systems. So type of questions in the prelims, you'll get questions associated with the portion of major rivers, their tributaries, and sometimes even a factual question will be asked about the storage structures across the major rivers, or dams, and sometimes even you can expect a question about major cities on the banks of the river. Cities on the river banks. In the mains examination, about the part of the forest, I'll tell you when we come to the portion of forest that what kind of questions can be expected from here. When we talk about the mains examination, here we can expect a question associated with properties of Himalayan and peninsular rivers. We can expect questions about the simultaneous occurrence of drought and flood, and how we can have the situation where, let's say, interlinking of rivers can solve the problem. Interlinking, pros and cons. And then also what we have already discussed about conservation of water. So these are few of the areas from the portion of river systems of India where you can expect a question to be asked from. Now, when we talk about the river systems of India, please understand that rivers overall everywhere across the world, they are referred to as a very important life source. For example, these rivers, they are also what are referred to as the cradle of civilizations, or these are the regions where civilizations take birth. For example, the Harappan civilization, that was based upon and around the region of river Indus and its tributaries. When you talk about the Mesopotamian civilization, so that was based upon the rivers Euphrates and Tigris in the present day region of Iraq and Iran. Then, if you consider the Egyptian civilization, that was based upon or dependent upon the river Nile and its tributaries. So that is where the river systems, they have always allowed the civilizations to grow, because these rivers, they end up providing water which is very much required not only for our day to day activities, but they are also very relevant and important enough also in order to, let's say, carry out agriculture, for feeding the animals, providing drinking water supply for rearing of animals, and for any other industrial processes and small work also. River systems are utilitarian or very significantly usable. In the early days, these rivers, they would also end up providing a means for the transport and transportation of troops and people from one region to another. So if you take a look at the history of the Mughals, now during the Mughal empire and during the reign of the Mughals, you had large section of the troops, and even in the case of the situation of Humayun, when Humayun lost the battle from Sher Shah, so at that point of time, the entire royal household, they were able to escape the battlefield with the help of the river systems in the region. So river systems have always been used even for defensive purposes. If you take a look at the era of the Mahajanpadas, at that point of time, you had the Magadhan Empire with its capital at Patliputra, becoming one of the power centers, one of the very powerful centers in the entire region, right? And Patliputra was referred to as what is referred to as Jaladurg, or water fortress, because around the region of Patliputra, that is the present day city of Patna, you have river Ganga and its tributaries, allowing the movement of troops and forces in all the different directions. So that provided a kind of a mobility, a kind of a defense, and that is what made the empire very mighty and almost impregnable. So that is the utility of the rivers. So the rivers have always played a greater role in all the various parts of the country, north to south, east to west. You would experience that in the local customs and traditions. Rivers have always been revered. They have always been worshipped. Why? Because of their life giving ability. Even in the case of temple architecture, I'm sure you would have covered art and culture in significant amount of detail. Even in the case of temple architecture, particularly in certain parts of the country, you will find that the rivers, they are also depicted as gods and goddesses at the gates of the main temple buildings. So that gives you about the cultural relevance, the cultural reverence of these river systems. And they have been a part of our lives. You have many of the festivals which celebrate the movement of the rivers and the flow of the rivers. So nowadays, because of ever increasing pressure of population, many of these rivers have started experiencing the wrath of it. That is, they have been getting polluted beyond proportion. For example, take the case of River Yamuna, significant proportions of River Ganga. They have been polluted beyond proportions, beyond the recognizable limit. So that is where we need to get the rivers back in order. And as a result of this mistreatment of rivers, dumping of waste in the rivers, and also due to the factors of altering the river flow, in many of the areas, this river water, that is experiencing not only significant amount of algal growth and poison development, the water level is also declining significantly. So here, let us study about the river systems of India And let us study the different types, the different parts of the river system, the classification of the river system, if possible. So these are the major river systems of India. Now, if you talk about the classification of the river systems, they can be classified first of all on the basis of where they drain into. So, classification on the basis of drainage. Drainage. So, there the rivers will either drain into Bay of Bengal or they will drain into Arabian Sea. Right? So, you can have Bay of Bengal rivers or Bay of Bengal drainage. Drainage or Arabian Sea drainage. But in this case, if we classify like this, then in that situation, there is a problem. Because in this classification, here for Bay of Bengal drainage, you will consist of, or you will count river Ganga also draining into Bay of Bengal, Brahmaputra also draining into Bay of Bengal, Kaveri, Krishna, Godavari, Mahanadi also draining into Bay of Bengal. But the features of the peninsular rivers are very different from Ganga and Brahmaputra. How they originate, where they originate, how they flow, that is very different. Even in the case of the Arabian Sea drainage, Indus River has got very different feature as compared to Narmada and Tapi. Now, what differentiates, what topographical barrier that differentiates the Bay of Bengal drainage with Arabian Sea drainage? So, the presence of Aravalis in this region, presence of Aravalis in this region, that forms a kind of a water divide. Then after that, the presence of Western Ghats, that forms another kind of water divide. So these basically, they form the water divide which separates the Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea drainage. But as I told you, this classification has got a problem in terms of the fact that you have different rivers which will be exhibiting different features in the same part. So that is why the more acceptable classification is the classification based upon their origin. Classification based upon origin. And when we talk about classification based on origin, here you can have Himalayan rivers, which are fed by the melting of the snow and ice, and these are the ones which originate at very high altitudes, right? So Himalayan rivers, and then you have the rivers of peninsular India, which don't have the presence of ice or glaciers. They are supplied by rainwater. So there is a kind of a seasonality associated with the flow. And that is where you have the peninsular rivers. Okay. So this is the basic classification that you come across. Now, let us take a brief look at it. So Indian drainage system may be divided on various bases. On the basis of discharge, Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal drainage. They are separated through the Delhi Ridge, the Aravalis and the Sahyadris, that is the Western Ghats. But this is where you have a problem, that many of the regions or many of the rivers in Bay of Bengal drainage, they will exhibit a different property altogether. Now here, then you have on the basis of the mode of origin, nature, characteristic, etc. There, the much more acceptable classification is the Himalayan drainage and the peninsular drainage. Out of the Himalayan drainage and the peninsular drainage, which is going to be the older one? The peninsular drainage. That is basically the portion which is much older. Okay, so here, if you observe, you should be aware of the various different rivers in existence. Anshu, my dear friend, Delhi Rage we had done in the first part of the class itself. The first session of the class, when we are talking about the evolution of the Aravalis and so on, we had discussed about the fact that at one point of time, Aravalis would extend all the way to the region of Haridwar. Now, those portions have been eroded, and that is the upland which is referred to as Delhi Ridge. It extends from the southwestern part of Delhi and extends further north all the way till Haridwar. Do we have an absolute no recollection of what we have discussed in the first session? How many of us we have no idea about the portions that we have discussed earlier? Any of us we remember that we had discussed about Delhi Ridge? Yes, it forms a water divide. Good, good. So that is the Delhi Ridge that we have discussed. Okay. Why peninsular rivers are older? Because the region of the peninsular part of the country is older. Peninsular part of India had basically been established long before and had come into origin many millions and billions of years ago. Okay, that is why. Now, out of the river systems here that you will observe, here basically look at one of the unique cases. That is the case of river Mahi, which is not a very major river. But if you observe river Mahi, that is unique in the sense that it is the only river in India which crosses the Tropic of Cancer twice. Okay, this is the only river which ends up crossing the Tropic of Cancer twice. So you should keep in mind these kinds of factual trivia. So this is where the Tropic of Cancer will be passing through. Okay, so river Mahi ends up crossing the Tropic of Cancer twice during its flow. Now, let us take a look at the Himalayan drainage, its properties, and then we will take a look at the peninsular drainage and its properties. So, Himalayan drainage, it will originate generally at very high altitude. Origin, very high altitude. The source will be melting of snow and glaciers. Okay, then movement, very high speed in the initial portion, in the youthful stage. Speed is very high. So when the speed is very high, erosion is very high. The carrying capacity will also be very high. In the mature stage, what is it that we come across? Large deposits, large floodplains. Large floodplains. Sometimes, and most of them in the mature stage, they move through sedimentary regions, move through sedimentary deposits, or rather alluvial plains. Right? So that is a common feature that you will come across. So here, when they are in their youthful stage, they have a very high amount of erosional power. So that is where they will carry out significant amount of vertical erosion as well. So in the case of the Himalayan rivers, you will come across very deep gorges, very deep valleys, which are created in the process. And when you talk about the middle course, the river gets very broad. Oftentimes, depending upon the flow of water, the river can also meander, change its course, and so on. So here, formation of meanders will be observed. Meandering of rivers. Meandering means unable to move in a straight line due to reduced flow. It will have a kind of a wavy path of movement. Meandering of rivers is something which will be experienced. Then in the lower course, they will end up forming these natural levees, the depositional features, very large and extensive deltaic formation. All of these will be a part of the mature and the old stage. Now here, many of the rivers, they end up shifting their course. Ideal example is the case of River Kosi. Now here, if you take a look at this image carefully, you will come across a situation where, observe the various different numbers that you see across River Kosi. Now River Kosi eventually will end up meeting with River Ganga. But in the process here, observe. So it is 1731. So in 1731, the River Kosi was flowing through this region. Then observe here, 1963. This was the flow of the river. Right. Observe here, 1892. This was the flow of the river. Now, 1963, this was the flow of the river. 1973, this was the flow of the river. So this river has been changing course, to say the least. Now, how is it and why is it that the rivers, they change their course? So it is dependent on multiple factors. Let us understand them. But basically, the basic factor which is involved is high amount of sediments when they are carried. That is, rivers carry very high amount of sedimentary deposits. And the deposits are dumped into the main river channel which obstructs the flow of the river. In that situation, the waters take the path of nearby low-lying area and move through that carrying out deposits or carrying out a new course. So this is the process. Let us understand that with the help of a schematic diagram. So suppose, let us assume in an area you have the topography somewhat like this. Let's suppose this is the existing river channel where the river has been draining for some time. Okay. Now, you have settlements all around. Settlements, habitations, that is something you will observe. Now, in a region, when people decide to settle down, even if the area is low lying, there is no issue in settling down in that region because they are sure that the river is, let's say, 100 kilometers away from where I'm living. So nobody will feel the danger of living in that region. So people settle down in various different places, right? Plain region, anyways. Plain region is very densely populated because of availability of fertile piece of land. Everyone wants to get a piece of that fertile land so that they can carry out agriculture or cultivation. That is why there is always going to be a population pressure. Now, in this case, the river, the Himalayan rivers particularly, they will carry huge amount of sedimentary load, very high amount of sedimentary load. Now, that sedimentary load will get deposited in certain cases on the sites, forming the levees and the Khadar region. And in many of the cases, that sediment will be deposited at the bottom of the river channel. Now, when it is deposited at the bottom of the river channel, that means what? There is a limited area for the flow. The flow has been restricted. Now, the volume available for the flow of water, that is now limited. Let's suppose again 1 year has passed, and again let's suppose there has been further more sedimentation which has happened. So further more sedimentation has happened. That means what? Sedimentation has happened. So the availability of volume for the water to flow, that starts getting reduced. Now, in one rainy season, let's suppose the water which is available is very high in the river, and river doesn't have a path or a volume where all that water can be accumulated or accommodated in the river channel. So if you observe at this particular region, there is not much of a deviation here. There is significant amount of deviation in this particular area, but here there is not much deviation. So here the river water will choose a low-lying area, and that is where it will decide to flow. River does not know which district I have to go through, or whether I have to go through a district headquarter, whether I will need an application or not. No, river is not concerned with that. River simply finds out a low-lying area and will start flowing there. So if it finds a low-lying area, it will start gushing through that. And the entire settlement, who might be living there for 50 years or 100 years, that might get flooded. So imagine a situation, just for a moment, imagine the horrible and the kind of a horror associated, where you have been living there for a couple of generations and more. And there you have been carrying out your agricultural activities, your economic activities have been carried out very regularly there. Imagine one fine night while you are asleep, suddenly you come to know that the river, with all its might, is coming towards you, is going to carry the house that you are living in, is going to carry the animals that you have, is going to drown permanently the agricultural fields that you own. That is the nature of floods that these rivers can cause. That is why whenever River Kosi changes its course, it spells disaster, it spells doom. In fact, disaster is also not the correct word for the proportion of damage that is caused. Many villages, many settlements, many people, they are lost forever, never to be found again. And here, all of this could have been stopped. All of this could have been prevented if only this particular portion of river channel would be maintained. That is why River Kosi has also been referred to as sorrow of Bihar, because of humongous proportion of devastation that it ends up causing because of regular shifting. Now, why it is able to shift? Had there been only the presence of igneous rocks, it would never have even dared to shift, because igneous rocks, they don't allow you to erode on your own will, right? Think about it like a kind of a disciplinarian and the discipline in charge that you had in your school days. If the discipline in charge would be very strict, no child or no student would even dare to get out of line. But if the discipline in charge is a bit relaxed, everybody has got a party on a daily basis. So that is the kind of difference between the sedimentary plains and the kind of the igneous rocks. Igneous rocks won't allow you to deviate. That is why this is a feature you will not find in the peninsular rivers, but you will find in very predominant amount in the case of the Himalayan drainage. Whenever River Kosi changes its course, immediately thousands of people, they lose their life, thousands of animals, which is a basis for economic survival in these parts, they are lost. Economic opportunities are lost forever. And that is why it spells national disaster. Last time it happened, around 15 years back, the condition, the situation of disaster was so humongous that it spelled doom in that region. It was called as a national crisis. Okay. Now, this is very similar to the aspect. Why is it that we have development of floods in the Himalayan drainage? Almost every year in the months of the later part of June, July, you will come across the news stories that Brahmaputra has flooded, that Gandak has flooded, Rapti has flooded, significant portions of eastern UP are submerged, significant portions of Bihar has been drowned, and for no fault of their own, just because you happen to live in that area, just because you are, let's say, born and you are settled in that region, you have to face that wrath of nature. So why is it that the Himalayan rivers, they flood, and they flood in such a significant amount of proportion? Everything. And the flooding of the river, I don't know if any one of you have experienced that. I'm sure you would have experienced or at least witnessed that flood. There are very few images which are as scary as the flooding of giant and massive rivers like Brahmaputra, like River Ganga. When these rivers end up flooding an area, it becomes like, or it gives you an appearance like a large sea. You never know where water is deep to what extent. And after the floods, the epidemics always end up following because of stagnant water. And that is what again claims a lot of lives. So when you have the floods in the Himalayan drainage, generally observed during the condition of advancing monsoon, that is when generally the floods are observed. Now, during the phases of advancing monsoon, what happens? And why is it that the floods happen? So there are two impacts. First is in the case of the mountainous region. So when we talk about the region of the mountains, in the mountainous areas, let's suppose this is the mountainous area where the river is originating from. Let's suppose the river is originating from here, draining through this area and moving through. Now, during the rainy season, you will have increased concentration of rainfall in this area, increased occurrence of rainfall in a concentrated region. Now, when you have increased concentrated rainfall, what happens? You will observe the flow of water increases significantly and suddenly. Now, when that flow of water increases, the momentum of the river will also increase. What will happen to the carrying capacity? The carrying capacity of river, the erosional capacity of river, will it remain the same? Will it decrease or will it increase during the rainy season? Good, it will increase because now the momentum has increased. So during rainy season, flow increases. As the flow increases, carrying capacity increases. Erosion, erosional power increases. Erosional power suddenly increases. And when the erosional power increases, materials carried or the silt which is carried, that also ends up getting increased, isn't it? So that is a kind of a cyclical process which pans out. So here, what happens in the plain areas, in the sedimentary plain regions? What happens in that case? So if we talk about the plain regions, now the plains generally have an incline or a slope towards the river channel, right? And here, far away from the river channel, you have many settlements which are always to be found. Many settlements which are to be found. Now, this is the region where the river water is flowing through. Now, when you have these sediments which are being carried, where will the sediments be deposited? In the river channel itself, some part of it on the sides, but significant portion on the river channel itself. So the river channel starts getting deposits of these sediments, right? Or reducing the volume which is available for the flow. Let's suppose next year also you have significant amount of deposits and further reducing the flow. So as a consequence of it, the river and the river water cannot be accommodated in the river channel anymore. So that is when the river overfloods its river channel. And when it overfloods, it will impact a very, very large area. It will end up impacting a very large area, and many different habitations will be drowned, will be submerged in the process. Again, leading to vicious loss of life and property. Loved ones who are lost forever. No amount of government compensation can ever bring them back. That is the impact of it. So here, these floods, they are a common occurrence. They are an annual occurrence. This is one of the reasons why in all these parts of the country, you would not observe a very developed infrastructure. And many of us, we fail to understand that. When we take a look at the region around the Assam plains or the eastern part of Uttar Pradesh, or let's say West Bengal or Bihar, we think that infrastructure is not developed because of various different systemic factors, which is true to a large extent. But many of the cases, in many of the years, it is the floods which carry away the roads, the railway lines, the existing road and highways. They are drained away by the floods. Imagine the power of the flow of the river, that the entire highway in itself, there is no evidence left after the floods that ever there was in existence a highway or a road network here. So, what will happen to the houses, the households? Now, this flood, can it be prevented? In the modern day, it is a shame if it is not prevented. A country which is aspiring to be one of the major sayers or one of the major poles in the emerging global order, it is a shame that even today we have so many people annually who lose their lives because of floods. Had it been, let's say, an occurrence once in 10 years, it is understood that it is a natural calamity. It is still not justified. But you can have a kind of an explanation that it is a natural calamity, and we could not do anything about that. But if it is happening every year, year after year, and people are losing lives, means what? The lives are not respected anymore. There is no value to human lives. Immediately after these floods, you will find various different politicians, regardless of the political kind of alignment or regardless of the political ideology. All these politicians having the relief materials being distributed in that area with huge posters of them and their party printed on that. So it is converted into a kind of a campaign and it gives them popularity. So, in a way, you can also argue that it is in their interest to increase their visibility, not to do something major in this. Can we prevent these floods? Absolutely, yes. So, what are the measures which can be undertaken to mitigate the impact of the flood? To mitigate floods. Now, here you face multiple problems. If and when you become a district magistrate or you are in charge of a district, let's say a flood prone area, that is where the headache actually begins. That is where you don't have the capacity to bring about a kind of a corrective measure. But at the same time, here you are accountable and responsible for the lives of millions of people in that region. Now, the weather department issues a set of warnings, periodic set of warnings. And we have discussed about the unpredictability of these warnings, the unreliability of these warnings. They will give you an idea or they will give you a kind of a red alert that there is going to be a huge amount of rainfall in the region of Himalayas. So the river water is set to increase. Now, upon reading the report, you will also panic that there is going to be, if the river water is going to increase, there are full probability of floods happening in that region. So if your region is an area near a major river, immediately you start ordering the evacuation of people. You arrange the evacuation materials. People are evacuated. You find out there is no rainfall. You find out that the river water has raised or risen, but it has risen by, let's say, 5 millimeters or 2 centimeters. Obviously does not make a difference. Now every person who is living there will start to distrust you. They will lose their trust in you because you are basically creating a kind of a panic in the district. So the next time when the weather department issues the same warning that there is going to be high intensity of rainfall, river water will increase, many people will never follow your orders or your suggestion. It will be very difficult to evacuate people, and that is when major floods strike. Water level rises by around 2 meters or more. Now, that kind of unpredictability, it still exists in the modern day technological scenario. That is a shame. Now, if we have the modern equipments which are deployed in significant proportion, for example, Doppler radar systems. Doppler radars give you an idea not only about where it is going to rain, but how much is it going to rain. So here, installation of Doppler radar systems. So better prediction of rains due to that will happen by installing or installation of Doppler radars. Then after that, let's suppose you have uh, the region of the river bed which has experienced significant amount of this silt which has been deposited. Now you can carry out desiltation by dredging. You have these large barges are like floating platforms. They will install a kind of a vacuum pump of sorts, not exactly vacuum pump, but just similar to that. It will extract, pull up that extra deposit and silt and throw it away. So this will be done. If this is done, it ensures that river channel is deep enough to accommodate excess water even during the rainy season. So here you will observe periodic and regular desiltation activities to ensure availability of channel depth. Of channel depth. Then after that, let's suppose another measure not very frequently talked about is illegal sand mining. Now, in many of the areas, you have a great nexus between the administrators, the bureaucrats who have studied equally hard to clear the civil services examination. Now, when they are posted, they basically, in a nexus with the politicians, they will allow illegal sand mining. Now, when that illegal sand mining is carried out, you remove the sand from the bed of the rivers. In a way, it will lead to multiple problems. First of all, it can eventually lead to the complete depletion of groundwater. Almost all the groundwater will be drained out. And also, the flow of the river that becomes irregular. During rainy season, there will be a sudden spurt in the flow. So by controlling illegal sand mining also, you can control the flow of the river. So putting a stop to illegal sand mining. But here the problem is that everywhere, including the people who have gotten into administration, the impact, or think about it in a way, the attraction of this money which is involved in sand mining is very high. Earlier, sand mining and illegal sand mining would be observed in the case of only the northern Himalayan rivers. The southern rivers would not have experienced this. But nowadays, this is something which is being found in the southern part of the country also, and in increased proportions. So once you carry out sand mining, so it has got illegal sand mining, it has got adverse impacts. First adverse impact will be, now the groundwater will be mixed with the main river water. So fair enough, during the rainy season, everything will be fine. But when the conditions become dry, even the groundwater starts to be lost. So that is where overall availability of water becomes less. Water scarcity prevails. And then the flow of the river becomes irregular. During dry season, almost negligible flow. During rainy season, significant amount of flow. Why is that sand mined? For construction. When you will build a house, when you build any particular aspect, you require sand. Now that sand is supplied by the black market. And that is where the politicians have their cut, the district magistrates have their cut, regardless of how controversial this is. In all these areas, everyone has got a cut. In few of the states, it is famously said, and no kidding about that, it is famously said by the various SHOs in police department that all they need is one posting across the river channel. Right, in their entire career, they are very content with one posting across the river channel, because in that one posting they are said to accumulate that much amount of money that multiple generations can basically relax and chill off, right? And if you ask them, frankly, if you get an opportunity to interact with any of them, you should ideally grab that opportunity. Now, if you ask them what happens if you get caught, they are very relaxed about it. That what if we get caught? At max, we'll get suspended, half salary will be paid, and we have enough money now to retire in peace. And even if, let's say, the case is dragged to the court, we have enough money to fight the case. Later on, we'll give some money to the politicians, we'll get reinstated, and again, life goes on. So that is true. In many parts of the country, that is true. Even in the so-called developed states of the country, that is something which is happening, be it Maharashtra, be it Karnataka, be it Tamil Nadu now, be it the region of Bihar, be it the region of West Bengal. This is very prevalent, right? So illegal sand mining, if you stop, you can basically control the flow. Then other than that, you also have afforestation and reforestation of the river banks. The afforestation and reforestation of the river banks. Many of these rivers and across these river systems, the river banks, they are cleared of vegetation. You have people building houses there. Now, what that does is, it not only exerts pressure on the soil, but whenever the river is in full flow, that also exposes the soil to be carried off very easily by the rivers. So that is where, what do we get? We get increased amount of sediments which will be supplied in the river channel, and that will eventually cause flooding. So by afforestation and reforestation which can be carried out, you can prevent the level of erosion, thereby you can reduce the amount of deposits which are observed. So that is basically the few of the measures to prevent flood. The impact of flood, that can be prevented by many other factors, but this is the basic factor by which you can prevent the occurrence of flood. But it is not done. A simple exercise like installation of more Doppler radars, that is something which is being delayed. And here, everybody is involved, right? Why? Because the priorities are different. Because there, when, let's say, a flood happens in the region of Assam Plains, a random district in West Bengal, a random district in Bihar, northern Bihar, will it grab the national headlines? Never. If it appears in the newspaper, let's say, that Malda district in West Bengal has been flooded, or let's say Katihar in Bihar has been flooded, how many of you will read that news story? But simultaneously, if a news story appears, Bandra, Worli region in Mumbai is flooded, the celebrities have tweeted that there is so much amount of waterlogging that my vehicles could not come out. Everybody will look at it with keen eyes. Bangalore is flooded due to and the nexus between politicians and builders. Everybody will be interested. So that is where the economic priorities are decided. Here, the argument which is provided is that because all these measures involve a lot of money, that is why the state governments don't have the capacity to implement this. But if we consider states like Bihar and Assam, they have been experiencing this for decades, if not for centuries. It is high time we bring a stop to it. Just because you are born in a particular state and are born in a particular region does not mean that your life becomes cheaper, does not mean that your life can be put at stake. So why is it that people don't do it? It is much more attractive to carry out a kind of a distribution of packaging materials, distribution of relief materials. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of a very infamous case where you had an IAS officer who was so very prominent that this IAS officer had his name image printed even in the Time magazine. So he was as powerful as you can get in terms of the media circles and so on. That IAS officer is no more, and he died because of health reasons. Now, later on, in amidst all that popularity, it was found out that that particular IAS officer who was posted in Bihar, he had gained all the national and international fame. It was found out that every year during these flood relief camps, he would earn crores, hundreds of crores of rupees. So that is where it is always a free money which is available. And no politician, no administrator is ready to trade for that, regardless of how many human lives are at stake, regardless of how many human lives are lost because of this. But always you have to remember that this is an issue that India cannot, in any case, India cannot afford to look over it. It doesn't bode well for a country which is vying to be a global superpower to have hundreds and thousands of people losing their life on an annual basis. Okay? So I hope any of us in the class, if we get the opportunity to become an administrator in these areas, will take much more wiser a decision. But then this is a feature which is observed in the Himalayan region, in the Himalayan states nowadays, because of rampant construction and various activities, and also the irregularity in terms of the rainfall. Even the peninsular rivers such as river Godavari has been flooding every year. Only difference is you will experience this in the month of August and September in the region of Godavari, and you will experience this in the month of June and July in the case of the Himalayan rivers. Okay? Then there is no need of studying ethics during preparation. Well, just wait for the time when you clear the examination. All the ethics that you have studied, it is thrown out of the window, right? If you get an opportunity to interact with the people who have cleared the exam, you get a very good view of that. Before the exam, they are all honest, right? You will get an idea as if maybe they share the same DNA as Mahatma Gandhi himself. And immediately after they clear the exam, the entire demeanor changes. And if you find out how they deal with the various different aspects of monetary gains, that is something which will stun you beyond your proportions immediately after clearing the exam. So when you get into 5-10 years of service, then it is a different ball game altogether. So that is basically the case of flooding in the Himalayan rivers. Okay. Now the peninsular drainage. All these changes just because of money. Majority of the happenings across the world are happening only because of money. Money is the driving factor in majority of the regions across the globe. Now we come to the peninsular drainage. So when we talk about the peninsular drainage, it is much more older. Why? Because the peninsular region is much more older. Now here there is a difference in terms of the Himalayan and the peninsular drainage. In the case of peninsular drainage, you don't have very high altitude origin of these rivers or streams. They will be originating at a modest region, at a modest altitude. And here you will come across a situation that these rivers, when they are draining or when they are, let's say, originating, they will be originating because of concentrated rainfall in an area. Then they will be moving through a hard rock bed, maybe of an igneous or metamorphic rock. So they will not have the luxury or the capacity to change their course, to shift their course whenever they want. igneous rocks, very difficult to erode. So they have been flowing there historically. For many, many years, those rivers have been moving through the same region without shifting their course. So that is why the channels are also very old. Now, because the river source is not through melting of ice or snow, that is where you come across a scenario or a situation where these rivers, they are also going to experience a variability in the availability of water in between various seasons. So in the cases of summer season, the water level goes absolutely low. In the conditions of rainy season, again the water level will be very high. Again, come the summer season, water level will be very low. So peninsular rivers, you will experience a seasonal variation, a seasonality associated, which is not observed in the case of Himalayan rivers. Okay, so here you will have broad, largely graded shallow valleys, no deep valleys or gorges typically, and Western Ghats act as a water divide because the slope of Peninsular Plateau, as we have discussed, that is from west to east. So majority of the rivers, despite originating very close to the Western Ghats, they will drain all the way into the eastern region. Okay. Now, here, peninsular rivers are characterized by a fixed course, absence of meanders, as well as non-perennial flow of water. Non-perennial means there is a change in the availability of water between various different seasons. Narmada and Tapi are exceptions in the sense that they move to the west rather than west to east, and because they are moving through Rift Valley. Okay, and these rivers they make estuaries. So this is the basic classification. You can use it for revision and the consolidation of materials before the examination. So for example, the peninsular rivers, the peninsular drainage is much more older, right? So here smaller fixed courses and superimposed rivers, mostly seasonal, dependent on monsoon rainfall, relatively smaller basin, they have older rivers. Whereas in the case of Himalayan rivers, they are covered with glaciers, they are perpetual in terms of perenniality of the river flow or perenniality of the availability of water. Then antecedent and consequent rivers are most common in that case. They have a long course moving through rugged plains and the rugged regions as well. And catchment area, very large, youthful river. Deepening of valleys is something which is experienced. Okay. As the leeward side of the Western Ghat experiences low rainfall, what is the source of these rivers? So most of these rivers you will find they will end up originating. So Western Ghats, it is not going to have a kind of a peak like this and then it moves or it has a slope on the east. No, Western Ghats will have a condition where this, if this is the scar plan, it will have a condition like this, and then there will be a slope. So majority of the rivers will experience high amount of rainfall in this region, and that is where it gives rise to the drainage. Okay, that is the feature which is observed. So that is basically the difference or the differentiation which is present. Now we start with the river system of the Himalayan drainage, and then we will move ahead with the river systems of the peninsular drainage. Here, what do you have to be aware of? You have to be aware of where the river is coming through. What are few of the major properties? That is all that you need to be concerned about. Okay, so we'll start with this discussion. We'll take a break in between, and then we will carry it out. So we take a 10 minutes break now, and then we carry out with the Indus River system. Break of 10 minutes. And then we carry out with the Indus River system. A confirmation about the audio, please. The final confirmation. If the audio is available, kindly confirm. Thank you. Hajra, how to deal with maps? Basically, the effort should be, we will have a separate mapping module as well. But generally, when you cover the maps, the effort should be to look into the portion of current affairs. Any particular region, any particular area which has been in news, the effort has to be, the endeavor has to be to cover it sufficiently with the atlas. Okay, look at those areas where they are situated. For example, any country which is in news, look at the boundary regions of those countries, which are the other countries which share the boundary with it. For example, right now, Ukraine and Russia, they are in news. Now, if we have the expectation that UPSC is going to ask a question that Russia is fighting a war with which country? Ukraine, China, India, Bangladesh. So such kinds of questions UPSC does not ask. So here UPSC is going to ask you maybe a question about Black Sea. Maybe it will ask you a question about Sea of Azov, which is present in that area. Maybe UPSC will ask you a question of the Dardanelles Strait or the Bosphorus Strait, which are present in that region. So whenever you come across any portion of current affairs, look at the vicinity of that region. You will get an enough idea or an enough clue about the portion of the maps as well. Okay. Which atlas is good? Any atlas is good. Any atlas that you have, that is also sufficient. And you would have gotten an atlas as well. So take that atlas. Any edition of atlas that you want or that you have is more than sufficient. From which year I should track current affairs for 25? So see, current affairs is something that there is never going to be an overflow of current affairs or an excess of current affairs. So even if, let's say, you are appearing for the exams 3 years down the line, current affairs should be followed religiously from today itself, so that you are able to look at the larger pattern of what is happening across the globe. When it comes to consolidation of current affairs, ideally you should try, if you have time, you should try to basically consolidate around 18 months of current affairs before the examination. Otherwise, 12 months, if you don't have time, 12 months multiple revision to the monthly magazine, etc., should be done. At least you should have revised those portions of current affairs at least 5 times before you enter into the exam hall for prelims. UPSC asks some random islands and asks to locate west or east. So see, if you look at the questions, if you, let's say, look at the questions asked 5 years ago, that randomly Spratly Island has been asked. So it is not a random question. It has been asked because that year it has been in news. So in all those areas, you will find that these regions have been in news. And that is why they have found their way into the portion of the question paper as well. Okay. Having said that, always have the expectation from the question paper that there will be around 10 to 15 questions, 10 to 12 questions out of the 100 questions in the prelims, which will be extremely factual. And it depends upon maybe what is your accumulated knowledge up to that point of time. So when you are targeting the questions for the prelims, never count for those 10 to 12 factual questions. Factual questions are asked in some portions of geography, some portions of history, some portions of science and tech, some portions of environment. And that is the nature of the subject. You have extreme factuality associated with it. And I hope we all are realistic enough that we are not aiming for 200 out of 200 in the prelims examination. There is no extra star or credit associated with that, right? You would not come across a candidate generally who has scored 160 plus, 170 plus in the prelims exam. So prelims, your target should be somewhere in the range of 115 to 120. If you are scoring that much, you are very well. Even 110 plus, you are very safe, and you can directly begin the preparation for the mains exam. After all, the prelims marks won't be counted. Now, in order to get 110, you do need to get 55 questions absolutely correct, net correct. So overall, you need to be able to attempt somewhere around 75, so that around 60 are correct and maybe 15 are incorrect. So in that case, The number of attempts should be between 75 to 85, depending upon the how tough the question paper is, and your logical skills will take it to maybe around 90 total attempt. Out of that, if you are able to get around, let's say, 65 of them correct, so that puts your entire marks around 110 to 115, and that is a very safe range to be playing with. The problem starts when we base our preparation dependent on the factual questions. When we take a look at the PYQs, previous year questions, we do know that there are many fundamental questions that we are getting incorrect. But that means the finger is pointed to us. The blame is pointed to us, that how is it that we have studied this, still we have managed to get it incorrect. So what the candidates do is they start chasing the factual questions. That if, let's suppose, a random place has been asked, let me study all the random places in the world. UPSC will not ask it again. UPSC had once asked the arrangement of cities from north to south and east to west. And that basically meant that all the students after that, they started learning this in copious amounts. You had multiple different YouTube channels which flourished in that spate, because all they would offer is all the cities of the world, east to west, north to south. UPSC has not repeated that question, but many students have been learning that, rote learning that year after year. So even if, let's suppose, you have a factual question which is going to come from distribution of minerals, and you don't know which mineral is going to be asked. So the solution is learning all the minerals. There are n number of minerals, right? Then you will learn the distribution also, the availability as well. And there is a chance that you might get a 2 marker question, and there is a equal amount of probability that no question will be asked. So look at the amount of time you invest. Ideally, out of 100 questions, regardless of how bright or brilliant the candidate is, even if that candidate is a topper, every candidate in their first reading of the question paper, they are able to get only around, they are able to attempt only around 40 to 45 questions. Even in that, they will get minimum of 5 incorrect, right? Anybody who tells you that in their first attempt or in their first reading they got all the questions, 45 questions of the 50 questions correct, they are lying on your face. Now after that, the next set of 20 to 25 questions should be worked by logic, because those are the questions where you would have heard about the topic, you would have come across the topic if your preparation is up to a standard. And UPSC deliberately frames those questions for you to be able to find the solution there on the spot by applying logic, by elimination. Still, you have a scope of dropping around 15 to 20 factual questions. So use your logic, use your brain. Sun Tzu had famously said, know your enemy before entering the battle, and victory is assured. So know the mindset of UPSC. Never play in the hands of UPSC. And UPSC likes that. UPSC, the question paper is set in order to trick the candidates. In 2018, UPSC had asked a question that which of these freedom fighters had visited United States. Now, that was followed by a spate of study materials where every candidate, they started learning about every freedom fighter where they had traveled in their past life. Now, that question has not been repeated by UPSC again. So look at the time that you are investing. Is it worth it or not? The easiest method is to cover all the bases. And amongst the bases, the most major part is the current affairs. Cover the current affairs, you will be in good hands. Okay. So now we come to the portion of the reverse. I hope that makes sense. I hope that is understood. And I hope that you inculcate this in your preparation process, not only for geography, but the other factual subjects as well. Anybody who tells you, other than few of the subjects, for example, if you consider the subject like, let's suppose, polity. Now, 18 questions are asked, 17 questions are asked, 15 questions will be from one particular book, right? Economics, etc. So there you can have a very high strike rate. But anybody who tells you that it is from this book that all the questions are asked, they are lying. So look at the amount of time invested and the return of it. Okay. Ambika, yes. You should ideally have a very good chance of clearing the examination if you have that benefit, that kind of a factor associated, and always try to gain a kind of maximum marking. Try to, in that case, try to attempt or attain a rank of double digits. That should be your target. Okay. So now we come to the Indus River system. Indus River system, one of the mightiest river systems of South Asia. Now, this has been a cradle or a birthing point of the civilization in this region. Now, this Indus River system, along with its tributaries, it drains through 4 different countries. It originates in the region around Mansarovar Lake in the Kailash ranges. Initially, it drains in a northwestern direction. Southeast to northwest is the flow. It enters into India through the region of Ladakh, and then after that, it takes a southward bend and then enters into Pakistan. And there it is met by the various different tributaries, and eventually it drains into the region of Arabian Sea. So the Indus River system also has got a tributary draining from Afghanistan. So this river system overall does cover 4 different countries in general. So here, basically, it is one of the largest river basins of the world. And in India, you will find that the basin area is around 3,21,000 square kilometer. These data pointers you don't need to learn. Please don't start learning these data pointers. And it is also referred to as Sindhu and is the westernmost of the Himalayan rivers in India. So this is where the river Indus ends up originating. Okay. It drains like this. Okay. It moves through here. And then it basically meets the Arabian Sea, forming a very large and fertile delta before meeting into Arabian Sea. Now, any particular river that we talk about, it will have tributaries, and many of the rivers also have distributaries. What is the difference between a tributary and a distributary? So, a tributary generally adds water to the river, right? When you have a river which is flowing, a tributary will add its water into the river. Okay, tributary will add water. In the lower course of the river, as it is about to meet the sea, at that point of time, because the flow is less, it diverges into smaller channels before meeting the sea. Let's suppose this is the sea. So it diverges into multiple smaller and minor channels. This is what is referred to as distributary. And this is a tributary. Now here, you also have the concept of left bank and right bank tributaries. So the streams or the rivers which join the main river from the left hand side, left bank tributary. The rivers which join the main river from the right bank side, right bank tributary. But here, how do we get an idea whether a tributary is a left bank or a right bank tributary? So always, let's say this is the flow or the directionality of the river flow. Always, when you take a look at the directionality, imagine that you are, let's say, standing here and you are looking towards the direction of the flow, right? So in that case, your left hand side will be the left bank tributary. This will be the left bank. And your right hand side will designate a right bank tributary. Okay. Now, River Indus, when we talk about it, it has got many smaller left bank tributaries, which are mountainous rivers, which drain and come hurtling down the mountains. These are not very long, and they end up giving their waters into river Indus. So, for example, you have Nubra, you have Shyok, you have River Gilgit, you also have Kabul, Hunza, Shigar, all of these. And then amongst the left bank tributaries, you have the famous five rivers. The five rivers, that is Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Byas, and Satluj. These five rivers, they are also what are referred to as Panjnad, or literally translating into five rivers. Now, this Panjnad basically ends up meeting with River Indus at Mithankot in Pakistan. That is where it drains the water into. It is after these five rivers that the name Punjab has come from. Punjab stands for what? Land of five rivers. And basically, it is these five rivers which drain through the region of the undivided Punjab. Before or pre-partition India, the land of Punjab had these five rivers, hence the name Punjab was associated. So here, if we take a look at it, Himalayan tributaries which are present, Shyok, Gilgit, Zaskar, Hunza, Nubra, Shigar, and Dras, these are your smaller tributaries. Right bank tributaries, Kabul comes all the way from the region of Afghanistan, Khurram, Tochi, Gomal, Sangar, even Shyok, Gilgit, all of these are basically your right bank tributaries. Amongst the left bank tributaries, you have the Panjnad. Now, what are these Panjnad? You have Chenab, Jhelum, then you have Ravi, then you have Byas, and you have Satluj. Okay? Amongst these, Satluj is one of those rivers which originates again very close to the origin point of River Indus itself. It originates closer to the Mansarovar Lake near the Kailash ranges, ends up moving into India through the Shipkila Pass present in Himachal Pradesh, and then eventually ends up meeting with River Indus. Okay. Now, here in the book that has been provided, or if the book is not available with you, just take a look at the tablet, the geography through maps portion of the tablet. There also, you will get the mapping portion and the mapping details of each of these rivers, the origin point, the meeting point, everything you will get in the portion of those mapping also. Okay. Now, here, then we come to one of the important river systems of the country in terms of the population that it caters to, the amount of population that it caters to. That is River Ganga and the Ganga River system. Now, Ganga River system, basically, it originates in the region of Uttarakhand and drains all its way here, eventually ends up entering into Bangladesh and then draining into Bay of Bengal. This also has got various tributaries and distributaries. Here, what you observe as River Hooghly. River Hooghly is a distributary of River Ganga. It is that River Hooghly which drains through the city of Kolkata, where you have the very famous Howrah Bridge. It is across River Hooghly. Now here, River Hooghly also has got a important tributary, that is River Damodar, which infamously was also at one point of time referred to as the sorrow of Bengal, River Damodar, because it would cause devastating floods. Now, River Damodar also moves through a rift valley. Just like Narmada and Tapi, this also ends up draining through a rift valley region. So here, when you talk about River Damodar, generally you will find very mineral-rich areas to be present. Now, immediately after independence, you had the construction of storage structures and dams in the form of Maithan Dam, for example, almost at the boundary between the present day Jharkhand and West Bengal. That dam controlled the spate of River Damodar It controlled the flow of river Damodar, and now you don't have the problem of frequent flooding. Now this river Ganga is joined by tributaries both from the left bank side as well as from the right bank side. Along the left bank side here, one of the first tributaries that ends up joining is basically Ram Ganga. Ram Ganga is the river which drains through the region of Corbett National Park, right, or the Corbett Tiger Reserve. And then it is followed by Gomti. It is this Gomti which basically has Lucknow, the city of Lucknow, the city of Nawabs, is on the banks of river Gomti. And the twin cities, that is Kanpur, which is situated very close to Lucknow. Kanpur lies on the banks of river Ganga itself. Okay. Then it is joined by Ghagra. Ghagra is again a very mighty river. Very mighty river. It cuts through the Himalayan ranges. And then Gandak. It also joins river Ganga in the region around Patliputra. Now, here, meanwhile, Kosi, river Kosi. River Kosi is basically one of those rivers which is joined by multiple smaller streams. Multiple smaller streams originate from the mountainous areas nearby, and they contribute to the water of river Kosi. So that is why those 7 rivers which contribute to the water of river Kosi, they are also famously referred to as Saptakoshi. Okay. Now here you have another left bank tributary here, which for some area also forms the boundary between Bihar as well as West Bengal, and that is the river Mahananda. Mahananda. Okay. Now, on the right bank side, river Ganga is joined by a major tributary, that is river Yamuna. River Yamuna will also have various different tributaries associated. So here it is joined on the right bank side with river Yamuna. In the region of, where is it that river Yamuna ends up joining? In the region of Allahabad. It is Yamuna which drains through the region of Delhi, Agra. That is where river Yamuna is going to drain through. And river Yamuna will also have its right bank tributaries, including the Chambal river system. Chambal river system. Here it has got various different tributaries like Banas, Parvati, and so on. And then Betwa ends up joining river Yamuna. Then here, from the region of Amarkantak, you have the Son river and Rihand river, which is a tributary of Son. They also end up joining river Ganga near Patliputra. So these are your major tributaries and distributaries of river Ganga. Now, river Ganga in itself, it does not originate as with the name Ganga. Here, you have the confluence of 2 streams or 2 rivers, that is Bhagirathi and Alaknanda. So Bhagirathi originates from the region of Gomukh Glacier in Gangotri. That is where it originates. And Alaknanda originates near the Satopant Glacier, which is present in the region of Badrinath. Now there they originate, they both meet each other at the region of Dev Prayag. At the region of Dev Prayag. And then after that, the river is referred to as river Ganga. Okay. Before that, it is separate as river Bhagirathi and separate as river Alaknanda. Okay. Now here, when we talk about river Bhagirathi, river Alaknanda, so whenever you come across the terminology Prayag, Prayag refers to that place where you have a confluence of river. So that is why in the region of Uttarakhand, you have the very famous Panj Prayags, where across Alaknanda, and even Bhagirathi, you have the confluence of the rivers. So let us take a look at that. So when we talk about the Ganga system originating in the Gangotri glacier near Gomukh, so that is basically river Bhagirathi which originates from here. Okay, and that originates in the Uttarkashi district of Uttarakhand. Here it is known as Bhagirathi. Now at Dev Prayag, Bhagirathi meets Alaknanda. Hereafter it is known as River Ganga. It has a length of close to around 2,500 kilometers and is shared by various different states, including Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, some parts of it, and even West Bengal. Now here, furthermore, if you observe, this is the famous picture of image of Dev Prayag, where there is a confluence between Bhagirathi and Alaknanda. Alaknanda originates in the Satopant glacier above Badrinath, and that brings us to the Panch Prayags. So this gives you an idea about the reverence, the cultural reverence, where the rivers are worshipped to an extent that the source of all these rivers, they are worshipped significantly. So when you talk about the Panch Prayags, this is relevant for your prelims. Okay, this is relevant for your prelims. That is the Panch Prayags. So here, observe that near the Satopant glacier from the Satopant glacier near Badrinath, you have the origin of river Alaknanda. Now this Alaknanda is joined from the left hand side by Dhauli Ganga. Now the recent incident at Joshimat, where the land has been sinking, that is across this region of Dhauli Ganga. Even a couple of years back, that is early part of last year, you would have experienced that, or you would have come across the news headlines that there has been significant flood in the rivers in Uttarakhand, which has led to loss of life and property, a glacial lake flood. That also happened across Dhauli Ganga. It is across Dhauli Ganga where NTPC is building the controversial Tapovan project, where you have had significant amount of instances of avalanches as well as landslides occurring because of the weakening of the rocks in that area. Now, as it proceeds further, now this meets Dhauli Ganga at the region which is referred to as Vishnu Prayag. Okay, so Vishnu Prayag is the confluence of Dhauli Ganga with Alaknanda. As it proceeds further, it meets river Nandakini. Nandakini originates from a side of Nanda Devi, the Nanda Devi mountain system. From one side of it, you have the glacier which feeds on and drains as Nandakini. That Nandakini ends up meeting river Alaknanda at Nandaprayag. And then from the other end of Nanda Devi, close by, you have the origin of Pindar Ganga. Now that Pindar Ganga ends up meeting river Ganga or river Alaknanda at Karnaprayag. Okay? Then from Kedarnath, from the glaciers above Kedarnath, you have the origin of river, which is Mandakini. And Mandakini meets Alaknanda from the right bank side, that is Rudraprayag. 10 years back, around 15th of June 2013, when you had the massive disaster and cloudburst at Kedarnath, it was this river Mandakini which flooded. And the devastation and destruction caused across this river was to be felt in the downstream region as far as the region of Kanpur and even Allahabad or Prayagraj. So here, that is where you have the Mandakini meeting with Alaknanda. Then furthermore, river Bhagirathi, which originates from the Gangotri glacier near Gomukh, that ends up meeting at Dev Prayag. That ends up meeting at the region of Dev Prayag. And then furthermore, Yamuna, which originates from Yamunotri, that is also a place of worship, that ends up meeting at the region of Allahabad or Prayagraj. So after Dev Prayag, the river is referred to as River Ganga. Now all these places, that is Yamunotri, Gangotri, Kedarnath and Badrinath, these are revered culturally. And these are what are also famously referred to as Char Dhams of the region. You have the construction of the Char Dham highway, which is being done by the National Highway Authority of India in that region to provide better connectivity. So it is in this area where you have the construction of this highway. So this also brings to light the cultural reverence and the worship which has been done historically to the river systems. Okay. Now, that is what the river Ganga and its important tributaries are. Ideally, you should also be aware about the major cities, which we can take a look at the portion of the mapping also. Then after that, we come to one of the most massive rivers in South Asia in terms of the volume of water which is carried. That is the Brahmaputra river system. Now, the Brahmaputra river originates very close to the area where Indus and Satluj originate. It originates in the Chemyangdung Glacier near the Mansarovar Lake in the Kailash Ranges itself. Now it drains to the east. And there it is referred to as Sangpo or Yarlung Sangpo, which means the purifier. There you will not find much deviation in the movement of river Brahmaputra because it is embedded between the very high altitude mountains from both sides. So it follows a kind of a fixed course. So that is where it ends up following a kind of a fixed course. Okay. Now finally, at the region around Namcha Barwa, which is to the north of Indian boundary, there the Himalayas, they take a sudden syntactial bend. So river Brahmaputra also takes a southward bend. It enters the region of Arunachal Pradesh as Siang, and there it is still a mountainous river, not very broad, still moving in mountainous areas, very high velocity. Significant amount of vertical erosion is carried out. It finally enters the plain region from the area of Sadia. This is where it enters the plain area. Once it enters the plain area, it is after that that the river is referred to as River Brahmaputra. Before that, it is referred to as Siang. Before that, it is referred to as Sangpo. So after the region of Sadia, that is when the river becomes mightily broad. So much so that during the peak of the rainy season, if you stand at one bank, you won't be able to look at where the other side of the river is. That is how broad it becomes. During the rainy season, in many areas, it becomes many kilometers broader. And this river also carries huge amount of sedimentary load. So that is why this river forms very large riverine islands, right? So this river system also ends up forming riverine islands. And when we talk about riverine islands, here, basically, significant, if this is the river, significant deposits are carried out. Okay. This is an island formed in the middle of the river because of the deposits. Now this river Brahmaputra also ends up forming the largest riverine island of the world. That is the Majuli Island. Majuli Island is the largest riverine island. Let's name this itself. So Majuli Island is referred to as the largest riverine island across the world. It has got its own constituency in terms of the state legislature. So it will have its own MLA elected as well. So you can imagine the size of Majuli, right? So where is it called Brahmaputra? After it enters the plains beyond the town of Sadia, where you have the very famous Dola Sadia Bridge, which was inaugurated a few years back. So that Dola Sadia Bridge is around 8 kilometers long. So imagine the flow of that river during rainy season. It is around this region, that is Sadia, where it is, after that, it is referred to with the name of Brahmaputra. Okay, it drains through the fertile alluvial plains and creates fertile plains in the Assam region. And that fertile plains which are created basically is very, very productive, very rich in terms of biodiversity as well. It is across the banks of this river where you will also find the various protected areas, for example, Manas, Pabitara, for example, Kaziranga, all of them are situated here. Now it has got left bank tributaries and right bank tributaries as well. The left bank tributary, you have River Lohit, right? At the right bank tributary, you have Subansiri, Manas, Sankosh, and even Tista. Now, this river Tista, up till the 1700s, would end up draining here and would end up meeting with River Ganga. But during the 1700s, due to excess deposition, etc., there was a stream capture, and that is where this river ends up now meeting with River Brahmaputra. River Tista is always in news. Always, whenever you have the discussion about Indo-Bangladesh relationship, River Tista will be in news prominently. Why? Because India and Bangladesh, they have had a water sharing agreement. Now, first of all, this water sharing agreement was demanded by Bangladesh for a very long period of time. But then, basically, it was during the prime ministership of Dr. Manmohan Singh when the central government promised Bangladesh that we will share the waters of River Tista. Now, River Tista is also important for the farming community in North Bengal, but the central government had promised it. The state government eventually put a denial, or they did not allow it. So Bangladesh was left disgruntled quite significantly. Bangladesh was very angry as a result of that. The common public perception that started becoming negative towards India. So when the present prime minister made his first visit to Bangladesh, there again the central government reiterated its commitment to share the waters of River Tista. But then again, when the time came to implement it, it was the Bengal state government of Bengal, who again put the veto that it is very essential for the farmers living in North Bengal and we cannot share the waters. And that is one of the reasons, one of the thorns which still exists between Indo-Bangla relationship. And that is where the common perception has been turning towards anti-India in the sense that the central government had been promising this, has been promising this, and eventually reneged from this promise. So that is basically about the river. So first of all, if you take a look at it, it traverses eastward longitudinally for a distance of nearly 1,200 kilometers in a dry and flat region of southern Tibet, where it is referred to as Sangpo or the Purifier. It emerges as a turbulent and dynamic river after carving out a deep gorge in the region of Namcha Barwa, right, where the Himalayas make a syntactial bend. Now, the river emerges from the foothills as it enters the region of Arunachal Pradesh. It is referred to as Siang or Dihang. When it enters the plains after the town of Sadia, that is when it is referred to as Brahmaputra. So, named as Brahmaputra, Brahmaputra after it enters the plains near Sadia. very close to where Lohit ends up meeting with Brahmaputra. That is where you have the very famous Dola Sadia Bridge. So, all of us who are not aware about it, search it online after the session, obviously, that where this Dola Sadia Bridge is. You should be aware of that. And you should also be aware about how it has helped significantly in terms of our troop movements in the frontier regions, in the bordering areas. That bridge has also allowed for deployment of heavy vehicles of armed forces, and that bridge had been in construction for a very long time, for a decade and more. Finally, when it was completed, that is when a lot of relief was provided. Okay, why the name change? We could have had one single name. We could very well have had a one single name, but basically understand different regions, different locale, different beliefs, different customs, different mythology, different kind of following. So the names also change. Okay. Now, you have the right bank and the left bank tributaries. The right bank tributary basically Subansiri, Kameng, Manas, Tista, Sankosh. These are your right bank tributaries. Left bank, Buri Dihing, Dhansiri, Dibang or Sikang and even Lohit. So these are your right bank and left. Now UPSC has asked this question twice consecutively. Twice UPSC has asked this question, 2015 prelims, 2016 prelims, that which of these are tributaries of river Brahmaputra. Okay, so if you know about these tributaries, you don't need to learn whether they are left bank or right bank tributaries. A mere idea about what the tributaries are, that will be more than sufficient. Okay, and this will not come in the first reading. Okay, please understand. If we have the expectation from ourselves that I will read it once and it will be memorized, just like I am able to memorize the other facts, it is not going to happen unless and until we have a genetic kind of advantage, unless and until our DNA is designed in such a way that we have a photographic memory. Whatever we see immediately is replicated. If we are average individuals, which I will assume all of us are, none of us are outside ordinary. If we are average individuals, multiple readings will be required to get these names in your mind. Okay, the ideal aim should be to be able to distinguish between which are the tributaries of which rivers. Okay, Anshu, I hope you got the answer for that. Now when we come to the peninsular drainage, we have looked at the features of them. Now here, river Mahanadi. Now river Mahanadi originates near Siawa, which is now Dhamtari, the Dhamtari district in near Raipur. That is where it originates. Okay, so presently that is Dhamtari in Chhattisgarh. Now this river Mahanadi also used to bring very devastating floods in the region of Odisha. Just like Damodar was referred to as sorrow of Bengal, Kosi was referred to as sorrow of Bihar, Mahanadi used to be referred to as sorrow of Odisha. And that continued till we had the construction of Hirakud Dam, which was done. After the construction of Hirakud Dam, there had been a significant amount of control in terms of the river flow, a control in terms of the amount of floods which were caused. Now, this river also forms few of the distributaries and forms a wide delta, very fertile delta, before it meets the region of Bay of Bengal. If you look at this particular river, this is the river, and it is joined by various left bank and the right bank tributaries. Okay, so if you take a look at the tributaries here, now the tributaries from the left bank side, left bank tributaries, which are those? So these are Shivnath or Shivnath, anything, proper noun. I hope I don't offend anyone. Then you have Hasdev, Mand, and Ib. And then you have the right bank tributaries. Out of these, Shivnath is the most major of these tributaries. So right bank tributaries, they will be Ong and also Tel. These are your right bank tributaries. So here the length is close to around 851 kilometers long. Now in the initial courses or in the initial portion, the river moves through a very rocky terrain, very significantly rocky terrain. So it is not fit for navigation. Navigation means being able to move men and material with boats. So it is not fit for navigation. But in the lower course, as the flow stabilizes, that is where it is navigable. So that is why navigation is carried out only in the lower course, in the region of Odisha, not in the region of Chhattisgarh as it moves between the rocky terrains. Okay. Now, then we have the largest river of peninsular India, that is River Godavari. Now, this river is the longest river in terms of the length and also the water carried. Now, this is very, very important for the existence or the survivability of water, be it for drinking purposes, be it for cultivation or agricultural purposes. The water of Godavari is very relevant for the survivability of population in the eastern part of Maharashtra, that is the Vidarbha region, and also parts of Telangana. Now, both these are drier areas. Very scant amount, very limited amount of rainfall is received. So here, Godavari originates in the region of the Western Ghats itself, right? Near Nashik district, again, wherever the river originates, any river in the country, always understand that has become a place of worship. Again, I will reiterate the fact that it indicates the cultural reverence, the cultural importance, the traditional importance that we have been providing to the rivers. Why I'm repeating this fact about cultural relevance and traditional importance is for you to be able to reproduce it. Whenever you have to write an answer about river pollution, let's say in environment and ecology, whenever you have to talk about the conservation of water in the rivers, always talk about the fact that there has always been a historical, cultural relevance which is provided. Okay, that cultural relevance is very significant. Okay, which means traditionally and historically we have worshipped the rivers, but now we are polluting the same, we are exploiting the same. Okay, Anshu, Mahanadi and Mahananda are different. Absolutely, yes. Mahanadi is the one which moves in Chhattisgarh and Odisha. Mahananda is the one, is a Himalayan river which ends up meeting with River Ganga. It forms a boundary region between Bihar and West Bengal. Okay. Now, when we talk about River Godavari, so near the region of Nashik, you have the place of worship, that is Trambakeshwar. So it is there that River Godavari originates, drains eastward, and is joined by various different left bank and right bank tributaries. So here, origin Nashik district of Maharashtra and discharges its water in Bay of Bengal. Now, where it discharges its water, it forms a very large delta. Many distributaries, they spread out. So here again, near the region of Rajamundry, if you get an opportunity to travel by railways across the Coromandel and across the eastern coastline, you will get to observe this large delta made by Godavari. That is where the railway line also gets very close to the coastal area. So immediately before the railway station, you will come across this large, very large deltaic region created in Andhra Pradesh. If ever got an opportunity, you should absolutely grab that. So its length is around 1465 kilometers long, and it is joined by various tributaries. So the principal tributaries are Pravara, Purna, Manjra. Manjra is a right bank. This is the right bank. Painganga, Vardha, Vainganga. Now, all these three rivers, Penganga, Vardha, and Venganga, they meet together and then they are referred to as Pranahita. It is Pranahita, which is a tributary of river Godavari. It is a left bank tributary of river Godavari. Indravati, which moves through the region of Chhattisgarh, where you also have the Indravati Tiger Reserve, the Maner, and the Sabri. Now it experiences heavy floods in the lower reaches and it is navigable in the deltaic stretch. Okay? Tributaries is something you should be looking at. Then, by the way, that Godavari, because of its length, that is also referred to as Dakshin Ganga or Ganga of the South, owing to the importance of it. Then, when we talk about River Krishna, second longest river, second largest river of the Peninsula Plateau. Now, this river Krishna originates near Mahabaleshwar and ends up draining to the east. Now, it is again joined by various different tributaries, Ghat Prabha, Mal Prabha, Bhima, Tungabhadra, and Musi. Now, Tungabhadra in itself is made up of two streams, Tunga and Bhadra, right? That is where you have the Bhadra Tiger Reserve, and that is where you will come across the Tungabhadra Doab. Whenever, again, next time when you study medieval history, you will study about the fact that Tungabhadra Doab, that was heavily contested, right? So, between which kingdoms? Vijayanagar and Bahmani kingdoms. They always had a war and a conflict because of the control of Tungabhadra Doab, because it is agriculturally very productive. Okay, so that is about river Krishna. This is Krishna. So here you will observe various different tributaries. Here you have Tunga and Bhadra joining together to form the stretch of Tungabhadra. Okay. Now here, if you will observe this river, Krishna, it is joined by few of the rivers, smaller ones, for example, Musi. Now Musi is a river, basically, where you have, on the banks of river Musi, you have the city of Hyderabad. That is situated on the banks of river Musi. Okay. Now, then we have Kaveri. Now, Kaveri originates in the Brahmagiri hills of Kodagu district in Karnataka from a place which is referred to as Thalakaveri. Very much close to the region of Coorg, the tourist location of Coorg. That is where Thalakaveri is. It is again a place of worship. Many people, they walk up to the hills bare feet in order to reach that point of pilgrimage. So here, length 800 kilometers. Now, this is a river which experiences rainfall during the time of the advancing monsoon in the upper course, and the lower course receives rainfall during the retreating monsoon. So that is why the availability of water is ensured in this river through majority of the part of the year. Okay, so that is the aspect of river Kaveri. And here the tributaries Kabini, Bhavani, Amravati, these are your major tributaries of this river. Okay, this is the Kaveri. So this is the portion, this entire portion receives rainfall during the time of the advancing monsoon. And this is the portion which receives rainfall during the retreating monsoon. Historically, this Kaveri has been, and the region of Kaveri has been so productive. It was the seat of the mighty Chola Empire, one of the mightiest empires that India has ever seen and witnessed, the mighty Chola Empire. They had their capital city on the banks of this river at Urayur. And it is there, across the banks of the river, because this river would carry out significant amount of deposits. It used to be agriculturally very productive. Cotton and rice used to be grown throughout the different parts of the year, and they would be then exported and traded from the river and through the region of Bay of Bengal. So that was the seat of power, so to say. Now, this is the river which gives rise to a lot of heated sentiments in the region of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. This has become a sentimental issue. In all the significant peninsular rivers, you will find one common factor, that there is a lot of dispute around the sharing of waters. That is not the case significantly in the Himalayan rivers. Recently, you have the dispute between the sharing of river Satluj. Otherwise, in Himalayan rivers, you will not come across these significant disputes. But be it Narmada, be it the case of Krishna, be it the case of Kaveri, all of these, they have been disputed, right? Because the peninsular rivers, they have got a seasonality associated with it. So the water flow is not very significant. That is why there is always a case of give some water to me, also give some water to me, otherwise we'll go on, let's say. And now it has become such a sentimental issue that large scale bunds can be caused at a drop of a hat. Whereas in the case of the Himalayan rivers, you have so much excess water in many of the rivers. Many of the states are struggling with that excess water, struggling with the case of the floods also. So that is the case with River Kaveri. This is a list, consolidated list, which you can use for your revision purposes. Okay. Does Karnataka and Tamil Nadu has dispute related to Katarina? Kaveri River water sharing. Okay. That is what surprised me. Okay. Yes. There has been multiple different river tribunals which have been set up for basically clearing this kind of a dispute. And you had commissions also which have been set up. That is what I told you. Now it has become largely the sentimentality has been attached with it. When people's sentiments are associated with an issue, it is very difficult to find a relevant solution in that case, right? Because then it becomes larger than finding a solution. It becomes a matter of your pride, your local pride, regional pride. And that is where both the states, they are very hell-bent to have a significant proportion of the share of Kaveri. Now, the problem with Kaveri is it moves through the peninsular region and peninsular rocks of the Karnataka plateau. So, in the region of Karnataka, many areas, they, in the groundwater is completely depleted. For example, consider the city of Bangalore, completely dependent for drinking water supply from Kaveri. Bangalore has almost exhausted the underground water in various parts of the city. And that is why it requires River Kaveri's water because of increasing population. Tamil Nadu requires Kaveri's water for agriculture. Same is the case with Karnataka. That is where finding solution is very difficult. You have to understand the solution is preserving and conserving water, ensuring rainwater harvesting. Majority of the rainfall in India is restricted to 2 to 3 months of the monsoons. That is where we have to conserve water. Because otherwise, every year, you have had significant amount of water emptied into the Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. And that is going to happen. That is going to be carried on. So that is where you need to conserve water. You need to store water. That is the solution. Okay. And then I have a couple of questions. Can we let flow of excess water to the southern part of India so that we can reduce vulnerable impact there and clear disputes of water to the south? That is where the concept of interlinking of rivers comes into place, Jay. Okay, Pranay says sand mining also one of the reasons for depleting groundwater in peninsular regions? Yes, a significant cause. Okay. Godavari is insequent in Eastern Ghats. Not so much so. There it has completely eroded. It is not cutting through the Eastern Ghats. It has eroded that region. So there it is not insequent. Then we have inland river. Inland river basically ends up draining within the territory itself. It does not meet into a sea or an ocean. That is regarded as an inland river. So here the case is of the Luni River, the Luni River Basin. So here, Luni ends up originating where? When we talk about River Luni, it originates in the region of Pushkar, again a place of worship. Pushkar in the Ajmer district. in the Aravali ranges. Aravali ranges. Now, this river is highly seasonal, very highly seasonal, in the sense that in this river, when you talk about the rainy season, the river channel will be absolutely full and flowing. But when you talk about the dry season, that is when it almost gives you an idea of a depleted river bed. So highly seasonal. But this river has another unique characteristic. In the upper course of the river, that is very close to the origin point, when you talk about the upper course of the river, that is where, because the flow of water is always present there, you will have the presence of fresh water. Whereas when you talk about the lower course, it basically empties itself because the flow decreases to such an extent. It empties itself into the region of Run of Kutch. So that is where the river almost stops flowing. Now, when the flow is decreased significantly, what happens? When the flow decreases, there is a lot of evaporation. When evaporation increases, what happens to the salinity level? It increases with evaporation. So that is why in the lower course, you'll find the river is saline. Saline water is in existence. That is basically a feature of river Luni. Okay, this is highly seasonal. Now we come to the interlinking of rivers. So interlinking was first of all proposed long time back, around 100 years back, during the British rule. It was at that point of time when you had an official of the British government proposing this measure of transferring excess water from a particular river channel to a river which has got deficit of water. And that was to be carried out by construction of canals, channels, etc. That is how interlinking was to be achieved. Over a period of time, basically, this went on a back burner. Immediately after independence, that is around the 60s, again this aspect gained momentum. Because India is a unique landmass where almost 75 to 80% of the rainfall is restricted to 2 to 3 months of the year. 75 to 80%. So when all that rainfall is restricted to 2 to 3 months of the year, means what? That for rest of the year, you need to be dependent on water. Many areas, while they experience floods, different areas of the country experience simultaneous occurrence of droughts also. So that is why interlinking is a must. That was thought. Again, it gained or it went into a slow back burner. It was when you had the late Atal Bihari Vajpayee, when he was the prime minister. At that point of time, it was worked upon significantly and modalities were chalked out. Three components of interlinking were drawn. First component, which would combine the Himalayan rivers. Second component, which would join the peninsular rivers. And the third component, which would provide an interlinking between Himalayan and peninsular rivers. But again, not much work was done. Some areas were inaugurated, but again, recently, that is a couple of years back, this has gained further momentum about interlinking. There are a lot of protests, there are a lot of, in a way, opposition to the aspect of interlinking because it is going to involve a huge cost. It is going to bring about submergence of certain areas. So that is why it is something which is very disputed. That is why every year in interview, one or the other candidate gets asked this question, that what is your opinion about interlinking? Should it be carried out or not? UPSC has asked the same question in the mains examination multiple times, that interlinking of rivers should be carried out or not. Regardless of whatever answer that you give, whether it should be carried out or not depends upon your thought process. But you should be absolutely convinced of that. You should have the reasons for that. And at the end of the day, when you're writing the conclusion should always be that, look, interlinking of the rivers does not mean every area will have water security. It is not the final solution to water scarcity that we are facing. Still, we need to conserve water on a day-to-day basis. We need to trap water which is received by rainfall, store it so that each region becomes water sufficient, water secure. Only then will we find a solution to water scarcity. So, like that, you can provide a kind of a solution. So, here very quickly, we talk about the positives and the negatives of interlinking. That is the advantages and the disadvantages of interlinking. So positives, advantages, it will takes care of dual problem of flood and drought. Then after that, other set of advantage here provides drinking water, then increases in area under irrigation. Okay, then after that, building of canals bring navigation, or rather makes navigation possible. Okay, aquaculture can be carried out, rearing of fishes, etc. Aquaculture can be carried out. Various dry lands which have become wastelands, they can be reclaimed with the availability of water. Wastelands can be reclaimed. Okay, then after that, you will also come across a scenario where if the water is available perpetually, population will also get redistributed in various areas. But a direct tangible benefit is construction and interlinking the construction involving interlinking will generate jobs and boost the economy. But what are the disadvantages? Why is it that so much opposition is happening? So, huge cost involved. Huge cost involved. As per the latest estimate, which was carried out 2 to 3 years back, the rough estimate is close to around 183 billion US dollars. That is the cost involved, almost as much as the economy of Pakistan as of now. Then submergence of natural landscape. Then after that, you also will face problem of relocation of population. Relocation of population. Then after that, you will also face an issue where natural flow of the river can be disturbed. Then after that, you will also face a problem in the sense that cultural reverence to the river can be a problem. You have a kind of a cultural reverence associated with various rivers. So that will be a problem in that sense, right? Biodiversity in the aquatic ecosystem will be disturbed when you have interlinking. Biodiversity can be disturbed. Okay? So these are the problems associated and the advantages of interlinking. Look at both these. Make your own mind up, but be very convinced that what is it? Because interview and the interview board likes to trick the candidates into a trap where if the candidate is indecisive that okay sir this can also work but if there is a huge cost I think we should not do it, they like these candidates because then everybody starts playing with that candidate. Okay, they because sitting through the interview process for the whole day it gets quite boring, so they like having their own share of fun. And these candidates, they will play like anything and they will not give them marks also. So whatever opinion that you have, be absolutely convinced with the proper reasons. So the interlinking, you have the Himalayan component, you have the peninsular component, and in between as well. Out of these, the Kane Betwa link is very close to being completed. But here, a lot of protests have been carried out, a lot of different activists, they have been protesting continuously. Because here, Kane Betwa link is going to carry out the submergence of a lot of area in the Panna Biosphere Reserve. And that means a reduced habitat for the tigers. That is why a lot of protest. Ideally, this project has been launched to provide water to the scarce region of Bundelkhand. Bundelkhand is a very dry area. Crop failures are a commonality. So, in order to provide water to Bundelkhand, that is why this Kane Betwa interlink is being carried out. Okay? So, that is basically, and here, please use this website and the link by the government in order to access the list of all the large dams that we have. This can be relevant for your mapping. Okay, so that is something that you should basically have an idea about for the mapping for the factual portion. So that is where we'll limit the discussion for today. I hope that the discussion and the sessions of the weekend have been meaningful. You have extracted something out of it. And we meet again next weekend, and that is when we'll continue. Interlinking, Anand, seems to be inevitable in the long run. Yes, and depends. See, for very long time, this has been stuck on the back burner. So it depends. So if there has to be a political will and there has to be a public participation as well. Okay. And Jay, see, I have to remain neutral in the sense so that I don't veer off your opinion. I want you to be able to form your own opinion. If you think about a perspective, so just to give you a perspective, it might be very costly as of now, but this is not something that you will end up incurring today. This is a long run cost, right? So here financing is also available from World Bank, JICA, and so on. But if you carry out interlinking, provided scientific research is done where interlinking is carried out, it will solve the problem of floods. Floods and droughts, both of them are equally scary, right? Availability and prosperity in terms of water requirement. In the 21st century, we are struggling for water. A country like India, which faces monsoonal problems and climate change, we need to have a water security. But then interlinking is not the final solution. Vishal, navigation point. So this is basically, see, when you will interlink the various rivers, you will build various different canals. So that is where you can use it for transportation of men and material through those canals. Okay. Yes, it can provide supply to industries, boosting economy. And how can possible all diagrams in exams? Roshan, you have to draw the diagrams. That will always fetch you. See, please understand, your competition will be drawing the diagrams. You cannot afford to lag behind in that case. And Prashant, Alaknanda and Bhagirathi River meeting channel. So Alaknanda and Bhagirathi, they will meet at the region of Dev Prayag, right? And that is when they will continue. What is it that you have not understood in that? So that is where Alaknanda and Bhagirathi, both of them originate from very different areas. Alaknanda originates at Satopant Glacier in Badrinath. Bhagirathi originates at Gangotri Glacier near Gomukh. And that is when they both will meet at Dev Prayag. After that, the river is referred to as River Ganga. The Panch Prayag diagram was there, and there was nothing else to that diagram. It was just the Panch Prayag. And it basically is the places of worship that you have, right? So here you have Alaknanda meeting Dholi Ganga at Vishnu Prayag, then meeting Nanda Prayag, meeting Nandakini at Nanda Prayag. Nandakini originates near the Nanda Devi. From the other side of Nanda Devi, you have Pindar Ganga, which meets Alaknanda at Karna Prayag. Mandakini is a right bank tributary which meets Alaknanda at Rudra Prayag, which was also flooded during the Kedarnath disaster. Then at Dev Prayag, it meets with Bhagirathi. After that, it is River Ganga. Okay? So that is where we'll restrict the session for today. So we meet again next weekend. That is when we'll carry out with the rest portion of economic geography as well as biogeography. So that will be all from my side. Take care of yourself, relax, have a good time, good night, and goodbye. Thank you.